Question 1. In Kingston upon Hull, during a standard driving test, what is the most appropriate action for a DVSA examiner to take when a learner driver hesitates slightly before proceeding at a junction where there is no immediate danger? Option A. Overlook the hesitation, assuming it is a minor lapse and not significant enough to warrant a fault. Option B. Strictly observe and record the hesitation as a minor driving fault according to the DVSA marking scheme. Option C. Offer a verbal prompt to encourage the learner to proceed, as the hesitation is not causing a hazard. Option D. Gently apply the brake to slow the vehicle down while the learner is still at the junction. Correct answer is B. Strictly observe and record the hesitation as a minor driving fault according to the DVSA marking scheme. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Kingston upon Hull because it requires balancing the immediate need to assess a learner's driving ability with the paramount responsibility of ensuring road safety for the learner, the examiner, and other road users. The examiner's role is to objectively evaluate competence against the DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, standards, not to provide remedial training during the test. A failure to adhere to these standards, even with good intentions, can lead to a compromised assessment and potentially put others at risk. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the examiner strictly adhering to the DVSA official driving test criteria and procedures. This means observing the learner's performance without intervention, unless immediate danger necessitates it to prevent an accident. The examiner's role is to record faults accurately and make a judgment based on the established syllabus and marking scheme. This approach is correct because it upholds the integrity and fairness of the driving test, ensuring that all candidates are assessed against the same objective standards as outlined by the DVSA. It prioritizes safety by only intervening in genuine emergencies, thereby preventing the test from becoming a training session and ensuring the learner demonstrates their independent ability to drive safely. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves the examiner offering verbal guidance or hints to the learner when they make a minor error, such as a slight hesitation at a junction. This is professionally unacceptable because it deviates from the DVSA assessment protocol. The test is designed to identify existing skill levels, not to coach the candidate during the assessment. Such guidance would invalidate the test results, as the learner would not be demonstrating their true independent driving capability. It also creates an unfair advantage compared to candidates who are not given such assistance. Another incorrect approach is for the examiner to overlook a minor driving fault, like a slightly imprecise lane position, because they feel the learner is generally performing well. This is professionally unacceptable as it compromises the objectivity of the assessment. The DVSA syllabus specifies that all faults, regardless of severity, must be recorded and considered in the overall evaluation. Ignoring faults undermines the standardization of the test and could lead to a driver being passed who has not met the required level of competence, potentially posing a risk to themselves and others on the roads of Kingston upon Hull. A further incorrect approach would be for the examiner to take control of the vehicle's steering or braking to correct a minor mistake that does not pose an immediate danger. This is professionally unacceptable as it directly interferes with the learner's demonstration of control and decision-making. While the examiner has a duty of care, intervention should be reserved for situations where an accident is imminent. Minor errors, even if they result in a fault, are part of the learning process and should be assessed as such, not corrected by the examiner, which would render the test invalid. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established regulatory guidelines, DVSA standards, and ethical obligations, road safety, and fair assessment. This involves understanding the purpose of the assessment, maintaining objectivity, and acting with integrity. When faced with a situation where a learner makes an error, the professional should first assess the immediate risk. If there is no immediate danger, the error should be noted according to the prescribed fault system. If intervention is absolutely necessary to prevent an accident, it should be done decisively, and then the test concluded or handled according to emergency protocols. The core principle is to assess competence, not to train or rescue during the evaluation. Question 2. Compliance review shows a driving test candidate presenting for their test in Kingston upon Hull has provided a utility bill as proof of residency, but it is a photocopy, and the name on the bill does not precisely match the name on their provisional driving license. What is the most appropriate course of action for the DVSA examiner? Option A. Accept the photocopy as sufficient proof of residency, assuming the candidate is being truthful, and proceed with the driving test. Option B. Accept the utility bill photocopy as valid proof of residency, despite the slight name discrepancy, and proceed with the driving test. Option C. Politely inform the candidate that official, verifiable documentation is required to confirm their identity and residency before the test can proceed, and offer to reschedule the test once satisfactory proof is provided. Option D. Conduct the driving test and advise the candidate that their residency and identity will be verified by the DVSA Administrative Office at a later date. Correct answer is C. Politely inform the candidate that official, verifiable documentation is required to confirm their identity and residency before the test can proceed, and offer to reschedule the test once satisfactory proof is provided. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver to operate a vehicle with the legal and safety obligations of the licensing authority. The DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, in Kingston upon Hull, like all licensing bodies, has a paramount duty to ensure public safety on the roads. This involves a rigorous process for issuing driving licenses, which includes verifying the identity and eligibility of applicants. Failure to do so can have severe consequences, including unlicensed individuals driving, potential accidents, and erosion of public trust in the licensing system. Careful judgment is required to uphold these standards without creating undue barriers for legitimate applicants. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously verifying the applicant's identity and residency status against official documentation and established DVSA procedures for the Kingston upon Hull area. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the DVSA mandate to ensure that only eligible and properly identified individuals are granted driving licenses. The Road Traffic Act 1988 and associated DVSA guidelines place a strong emphasis on preventing fraud and ensuring that drivers meet the required standards of competence and legal standing. By confirming the applicant's details through accepted channels, the examiner upholds the integrity of the licensing process and prioritizes road safety for the residents of Kingston upon Hull. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves accepting the applicant's verbal assurance of their identity and residency without requesting or verifying any official documentation. This is professionally unacceptable as it bypasses fundamental security checks designed to prevent identity fraud and ensure compliance with licensing regulations. It directly contravenes the DVSA duty of care and could lead to unqualified or ineligible individuals obtaining driving licenses, posing a significant risk to public safety. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the driving test based on a photocopied document that is not officially certified or recognized by the DVSA as valid proof of identity or residency. While the applicant has provided some form of documentation, the lack of verification of its authenticity and validity means the DVSA requirements are not met. This approach risks accepting fraudulent or expired documents, undermining the licensing system's integrity, and potentially allowing individuals who do not meet the legal requirements to drive. A further incorrect approach is to defer the decision to a later stage, such as after the test has been completed, to verify the applicant's details. This is professionally unacceptable because the eligibility and identity verification should be a prerequisite to conducting the test. Delaying these checks means that the test itself may be conducted under false pretenses, and if the applicant is found to be ineligible, the entire process becomes invalid, wasting resources and potentially creating a false sense of security for the applicant. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should follow a clear decision-making framework. First, they must identify the core regulatory requirements and ethical obligations, which in this case are centered on public safety and the integrity of the licensing process as mandated by the DVSA. Second, they should assess the available information and documentation against these requirements. Third, they must apply established procedures for verification, seeking clarification or additional documentation when necessary. Finally, they should make a decision that upholds regulatory compliance and ethical standards, prioritizing safety and fairness. If there is any doubt about the authenticity or validity of documentation, the professional must err on the side of caution and seek further verification before proceeding. Question 3. Regulatory review indicates that a driving instructor in Kingston upon Hull has a learner driver who is eager to book their practical driving test, expressing high confidence in their abilities. However, the instructor has reservations, feeling the learner is nearly there, but not consistently demonstrating all required competencies to the standard expected by the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, DVSA. What is the most professionally responsible course of action for the instructor? Option A. Conduct a final mock driving test simulating DVSA conditions, objectively assessing the learner against the official test criteria and common fault categories, and only book the test if the learner achieves a standard that minimizes or eliminates serious and dangerous faults. Option B. Book the practical driving test immediately to allow the learner to experience the test environment, with the hope that the examiner will be understanding of any minor shortcomings. Option C. Book the practical driving test based on the learner's expressed confidence and the instructor's general feeling that they are almost ready, without a formal, objective assessment against DVSA standards. Option D. Postpone booking the practical driving test indefinitely, citing the learner's perceived lack of absolute perfection, without providing specific areas for improvement. The correct answer is A. Conduct a final mock driving test simulating DVSA conditions, objectively assessing the learner against the official test criteria and common fault categories, and only book the test if the learner achieves a standard that minimizes or eliminates serious and dangerous faults. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Kingston upon Hull due to the potential conflict between a learner driver's perceived readiness and the strict requirements of the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, DVSA regulations for the practical driving test. The instructor must balance their duty of care to the learner, their professional integrity, and adherence to the legal framework governing driver testing in the UK. Misjudging a candidate's readiness can lead to unnecessary test fees, potential disappointment for the learner, and more critically, the risk of a poorly prepared driver being licensed. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough, objective assessment of the learner's driving skills against the DVSA published test standards and common faults. This means ensuring the learner can consistently demonstrate safe driving in various conditions, including independent driving, and has minimized or eliminated driving faults that would result in a serious or dangerous grade. This aligns with the DVSA mandate to ensure all newly qualified drivers are safe and competent, thereby protecting public road safety. The instructor's professional duty is to prepare the candidate to meet these standards, not simply to get them to pass. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with booking the test solely based on the learner's expressed desire and a general feeling of confidence, without a rigorous, objective evaluation against DVSA criteria. This fails to uphold the instructor's professional responsibility to ensure the learner is genuinely test-ready, and could lead to the learner failing, incurring unnecessary costs, and delaying their progress. It prioritizes the learner's immediate emotional state over their actual preparedness and road safety. Another incorrect approach is to book the test with the intention of seeing how they go or hoping the examiner will be lenient. This demonstrates a lack of professional integrity and a disregard for the DVSA testing procedures. The practical driving test is designed to be a standardized assessment of competence, and attempting to circumvent or undermine this process is unethical and unprofessional. It also sets a poor example for the learner regarding the importance of thorough preparation and adherence to regulations. A further incorrect approach is to postpone booking the test indefinitely because the instructor feels the learner is almost there, but cannot articulate specific areas for improvement. While caution is important, an indefinite delay without clear, actionable feedback prevents the learner from progressing and may stem from the instructor's own anxieties rather than objective assessment. Professional practice requires identifying specific areas for development and setting clear goals for the learner to achieve before test readiness. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should adopt a structured decision-making process. Firstly, they must be intimately familiar with the DVSA practical driving test syllabus and marking criteria. Secondly, they should conduct regular, objective assessments of the learner's performance, documenting progress and identifying specific areas for improvement. Thirdly, They should engage in open and honest communication with the learner, clearly explaining their readiness for the test and the rationale behind any recommendations. Finally, the decision to book a test should be based on a consensus between the instructor and learner, underpinned by the instructor's professional judgment that the learner has met the required standards for safe and competent driving. Question 4. Consider a scenario where a driving instructor in Kingston upon Hull has conducted a comprehensive mock driving test with a learner who is eager to book their official DVSA test. During this mock test, the learner exhibited several minor driving faults and one potentially serious fault that could have resulted in a serious or dangerous grading if it had occurred on the actual test. The learner, however, is insistent on booking the test immediately, citing their financial investment in the test slot and their belief that they can perform better on the day. What is the most professionally responsible course of action for the driving instructor? Option A. Agree to book the test for the learner, hoping that the examiner will not notice the faults during the assessment. Option B. Book the test as requested by the learner, as they have already paid for the slot and are insistent, despite the identified faults. Option C. Encourage the learner to book the test, suggesting that the examiner might be lenient on the day and overlook minor issues. Option D. Advise the learner that they are not yet ready for the test and explain that the identified faults need to be rectified before a booking is made, referencing the DVSA standards for a pass. The correct answer is D. Advise the learner that they are not yet ready for the test and explain that the identified faults need to be rectified before a booking is made, referencing the DVSA standards for a pass. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Kingston upon Hull due to the potential conflict between a learner driver's perceived readiness and the strict requirements of the UK's Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, DVSA, testing standards. The instructor must balance their duty of care to the learner, the public, and their professional integrity against the learner's eagerness and potential financial implications of delaying the test. The pressure to pass a learner who may not yet be fully competent requires careful judgment, adherence to regulations, and ethical consideration. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough, objective assessment of the learner's driving skills against the DVSA published test criteria. This means identifying any faults, even minor ones, that could lead to a serious or dangerous grade, or accumulate to more than 15 driving faults. If the learner demonstrates any such faults during a mock test that mirrors the actual DVSA examination, the instructor must advise against booking the test. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the DVSA mandate to ensure all drivers on UK roads are safe and competent. The instructor's primary ethical and professional obligation is to public safety and upholding the integrity of the driving test, which is designed to prevent unqualified individuals from obtaining a license. Advising against the test when standards are not met is a direct application of the Highway Code and the DVSA own guidance on preparing candidates for the test. Incorrect approach is analysis. Advising the learner to book the test despite identifying significant faults, with the intention of the examiner being lenient, is professionally unacceptable. This approach undermines the DVSA assessment process and prioritizes the learner's immediate desire over public safety. It is a failure to uphold professional standards and could lead to an unqualified driver being licensed, posing a risk to themselves and others. Suggesting the learner book the test and hoping the examiner doesn't notice the faults is equally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of integrity and a willingness to deceive the testing authority. It is a direct violation of the trust placed in driving instructors by the DVSA and the public. Agreeing to book the test solely because the learner is insistent and has already paid for the test slot, without a genuine assessment of their readiness, is also professionally unsound. While financial considerations are a factor, they cannot override the fundamental requirement for the learner to demonstrate competence and safety. This approach prioritizes commercial interests over regulatory compliance and public safety, which is an ethical and professional failing. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes objective assessment and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Understanding and consistently applying the DVSA official test criteria. 2. Conducting thorough and realistic mock tests that simulate the actual examination environment. 3. Providing clear, constructive feedback to the learner, detailing any areas of weakness. 4. Communicating honestly and directly with the learner about their readiness for the test, even if it means delivering unwelcome news. 5. Documenting assessments and advice given to the learner. 6. Prioritizing public safety and the integrity of the licensing process above all other considerations. Question 5. Upon reviewing a learner driver's progress in Kingston upon Hull, a driving instructor notes that while the learner is enthusiastic and eager to book their practical driving test, they consistently demonstrate hesitation in complex junctions and struggle with maintaining appropriate speed on rural roads, areas critical for a successful DVSA assessment. The learner expresses frustration with the perceived slow pace of progress and urges the instructor to book the test immediately. What is the most professionally responsible course of action for the driving instructor? Option A. Book the driving test for a date in the near future and continue lessons, but focus primarily on general driving rather than the specific areas of weakness identified. Option B. Tell the learner that their feelings are irrelevant and that they will book the test when the instructor deems it appropriate, without further explanation. Option C. Agree to book the driving test immediately as requested by the learner to boost their confidence and allow them to experience the test environment. Option D. Provide the learner with detailed, specific feedback on the areas of weakness, explaining how these relate to DVSA test requirements, and propose a targeted practice plan to address these issues before considering test booking. The correct answer is D. Provide the learner with detailed, specific feedback on the areas of weakness, explaining how these relate to DVSA test requirements, and propose a targeted practice plan to address these issues before considering test booking. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Kingston upon Hull due to the potential conflict between a learner driver's perceived readiness and the instructor's professional responsibility to ensure road safety and adherence to the DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, standards. The instructor must balance the learner's eagerness with the objective assessment of their competence, considering the safety of the learner, other road users, and the public. The pressure from the learner to book the test prematurely, coupled with the potential for a negative impact on the learner's confidence if they fail, requires careful judgment and clear communication. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the instructor providing clear, objective feedback to the learner, explaining precisely why they are not yet ready for the driving test in Kingston upon Hull. This includes referencing specific areas of weakness that need improvement, such as hazard perception, independent driving, or vehicle control, and linking these to the DVSA assessment criteria. The instructor should then propose a structured plan for further practice to address these specific issues, setting realistic expectations for when the learner might be ready. This approach upholds the instructor's duty of care, ensures compliance with DVSA standards for test readiness, and fosters a transparent and trusting relationship with the learner, ultimately aiming for a successful test outcome. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves agreeing to book the test immediately without further assessment. This fails to uphold the instructor's professional duty to ensure the learner is adequately prepared according to DVSA standards. It prioritizes the learner's immediate desire over their actual readiness and road safety, potentially leading to a failed test, increased costs for the learner, and a negative experience. This also undermines the integrity of the driving test process. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the learner's concerns about their readiness and insist they continue lessons without addressing their specific anxieties. While the instructor's judgment is paramount, ignoring a learner's expressed feelings without explanation can damage the professional relationship and lead to resentment. It doesn't provide the learner with the necessary understanding of their own progress or the specific skills they need to develop, which is crucial for effective learning and eventual test success. A further incorrect approach is to book the test and then significantly reduce the focus on areas of weakness, assuming the test environment will provide sufficient pressure for improvement. This is a dereliction of the instructor's responsibility to provide targeted training. It exposes the learner to unnecessary risk and is unlikely to result in a pass, as the test requires demonstrated competence, not just exposure to challenging situations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Objective assessment, continuously evaluating the learner's skills against the DVSA test standards. 2. Clear communication, providing honest, constructive, and specific feedback, explaining the rationale behind any recommendations. 3. Collaborative planning, working with the learner to develop a realistic practice plan that addresses identified weaknesses. 4. Ethical responsibility, upholding the duty of care to the learner and the public by ensuring they are genuinely test-ready. 5. Regulatory adherence, ensuring all actions align with DVSA guidelines and professional conduct standards for driving instructors in the UK. Question 6. When evaluating a driving candidate's performance during their practical driving test in Kingston upon Hull, and the candidate fails to stop at a red traffic light, what is the most appropriate and professionally responsible course of action for the driving instructor to take? Option A. Immediately stop the vehicle and terminate the test due to the critical safety violation. Option B. Stop the vehicle, but then engage in a lengthy explanation of the error before deciding whether to continue the test. Option C. Verbally warn the candidate about the red light and allow them to continue the test, noting it as a minor fault. Option D. Allow the candidate to continue driving after the red light violation, assuming they will correct their behavior and note it as a minor fault. The correct answer is A. Immediately stop the vehicle and terminate the test due to the critical safety violation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driving instructor to balance the immediate need to ensure a candidate's safety with the candidate's desire to complete the test and the potential impact on the instructor's reputation and the candidate's future driving opportunities. A driving instructor in Kingston upon Hull, operating under UK regulations and DVSA guidelines, must make a swift, informed decision that prioritizes public safety above all else, even if it means failing a candidate or causing them distress. The instructor's judgment is critical in assessing whether a minor error is a genuine lapse in judgment or a sign of a more serious, potentially dangerous, underlying issue. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the driving instructor immediately intervening and stopping the vehicle when they observe a clear and present danger, such as the candidate failing to stop at a red traffic light. This approach aligns directly with the DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, primary objective of ensuring road safety. The Highway Code, which forms a fundamental part of the driving test syllabus in the UK, explicitly states the rules for traffic lights and the imperative to stop when required. Failing to stop at a red light is a serious traffic offense and a clear indication that the candidate is not yet safe to drive independently. By stopping the vehicle, the instructor is fulfilling their duty of care to the candidate and other road users, preventing a potential accident and ensuring the integrity of the driving test process. This action is not only a regulatory requirement, but also an ethical imperative. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to allow the candidate to continue driving after failing to stop at a red light, with the intention of noting it as a minor fault. This is a severe regulatory and ethical failure. It directly contravenes the DVSA safety mandate and the principles of the Highway Code. Allowing a candidate who has demonstrated such a critical lapse in judgment and disregard for traffic signals to continue driving poses an immediate and unacceptable risk to themselves and others, undermines the entire purpose of the driving test, which is to certify that a driver is competent and safe. Another incorrect approach would be to verbally warn the candidate about the red light but not stop the vehicle, assuming they will correct their behavior. This is also a failure of professional duty. While a verbal warning might be appropriate for less critical errors, a red light violation is a serious offense that demands immediate action. Relying on the candidate to self-correct in such a situation is negligent and fails to adequately address the immediate danger. The instructor has a proactive responsibility to manage risk, not to passively observe and hope for the best. A further incorrect approach would be to stop the vehicle, but then proceed to explain the error in extensive detail before resuming the test, potentially allowing the candidate to continue as if the incident were a minor learning point. While providing feedback is important, the immediate priority after a red light violation is to ensure the vehicle is safely stopped and the immediate danger is averted. Delaying the necessary safety intervention to engage in a lengthy explanation before securing the situation is a misapplication of priorities and could still leave the situation precarious. The test should be terminated at that point due to the severity of the fault. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves 1. Immediate hazard identification, recognizing the red light violation as a critical safety hazard. 2. Duty of care assessment, understanding the paramount responsibility to ensure the safety of the candidate and the public. 3. Regulatory compliance check, recalling the specific rules of the Highway Code and DVSA guidelines regarding red lights and test termination. 4. Action implementation, taking decisive action to mitigate the immediate risk, stopping the vehicle. 5. Consequence management, following established procedures for test termination and feedback. The decision-making process must be swift, decisive, and always prioritize safety and regulatory adherence. Question 7. Following their successful driving test in Kingston upon Hull, a new driver is contemplating their ongoing responsibilities regarding vehicle safety. They are unsure about the extent of their personal duty to ensure their vehicle remains roadworthy between formal inspections, and how this relates to potential DVSA roadside checks. Which of the following best reflects the driver's proactive and legally compliant approach to vehicle maintenance and roadworthiness? Option A. Only addressing vehicle maintenance when a breakdown occurs or when a specific warning light illuminates on the dashboard, as this indicates a problem that requires immediate attention. Option B. Believing that passing the driving test means the vehicle is automatically deemed safe for the foreseeable future, and that any problems will be identified by the DVSA during random roadside checks. Option C. Regularly performing basic visual checks on tires, lights, and fluid levels, and seeking professional servicing when any issues are suspected or indicated by the vehicle's dashboard. Option D. Delegating all vehicle maintenance entirely to a mechanic without any personal involvement or understanding of the vehicle's condition, assuming the mechanic will ensure compliance. The correct answer is C. Regularly performing basic visual checks on tires, lights, and fluid levels, and seeking professional servicing when any issues are suspected or indicated by the vehicle's dashboard. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a newly qualified driver in Kingston upon Hull is seeking to understand their responsibilities regarding vehicle maintenance and its impact on roadworthiness, particularly in relation to potential roadside checks by the DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires the driver to move beyond simply passing the test to actively embracing a proactive and responsible approach to vehicle safety, which is a continuous obligation. The driver must understand that passing the test is a gateway, not an endpoint, for ensuring their vehicle is safe to operate on public roads. The best approach involves the driver taking personal responsibility for understanding and performing basic vehicle safety checks and knowing when to seek professional assistance. This includes regularly inspecting tire pressure and tread depth, checking lights, and ensuring fluid levels are adequate. This aligns with the fundamental ethical duty of all road users to ensure their vehicle does not pose a danger to themselves or others, and with the legal requirements under the Road Traffic Act 1988, specifically concerning the condition of vehicles, and associated regulations enforced by the DVSA. Proactive maintenance and awareness are key to preventing breakdowns and potential penalties. An incorrect approach would be to assume that passing the driving test absolves them of all responsibility for vehicle maintenance, believing that any issues will be identified by the DVSA during a roadside check. This demonstrates a passive and potentially dangerous misunderstanding of roadworthiness obligations, fails to acknowledge the driver's continuous duty of care, and the fact that DVSA checks are reactive, not a substitute for proactive maintenance. Relying solely on DVSA checks is a failure to uphold the legal requirement to maintain a vehicle in a roadworthy condition at all times. Another incorrect approach is to delegate all vehicle maintenance solely to a mechanic without any personal understanding or oversight. While professional mechanics are essential, a driver must possess a basic level of awareness to identify obvious signs of potential problems, such as unusual noises, warning lights on the dashboard, or visible damage. Complete abdication of personal responsibility in this area can lead to overlooked issues that could compromise safety and lead to legal repercussions. This approach neglects the driver's ultimate responsibility for the condition of the vehicle they are operating. Professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a commitment to continuous learning and responsibility. This includes understanding that roadworthiness is an ongoing requirement, not a one-time assessment. Drivers should familiarize themselves with basic vehicle maintenance checks, understand the significance of dashboard warning lights, and know when to consult a qualified mechanic. This proactive stance, coupled with a willingness to take ownership of vehicle safety, is crucial for responsible driving and compliance with regulations in Kingston upon Hull and across the UK. Question 8. The risk matrix shows a Hull City Council employee has a close personal relationship with a director of a company bidding for a significant waste management contract. Considering the principles of good governance and the Local Government Act 1972, what is the most appropriate course of action for the employee? Option A. Resign from their position at Hull City Council to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Option B. Continue to participate in the tender evaluation process, confident that personal impartiality can be maintained. Option C. Immediately declare the personal relationship to the relevant council authority and seek guidance on managing the potential conflict of interest. Option D. Discreetly advocate for the company with which they have a personal relationship during internal discussions about the tender. Correct answer is C. Immediately declare the personal relationship to the relevant council authority and seek guidance on managing the potential conflict of interest. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a potential conflict of interest arising from a Hull City Council employee's involvement in a tender process for a new waste management contract. This scenario is professionally challenging because it pits the employee's personal relationships against their duty to act impartially and in the best interests of the council and the public. Maintaining public trust and ensuring fair competition are paramount. The best approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the potential conflict of interest to the relevant authority within Hull City Council, such as the head of procurement or the monitoring officer. This approach is correct because it adheres to the principles of good governance and the specific requirements of the Local Government Act 1972 and the Council's own standing orders regarding declarations of interest. By disclosing, the employee allows the Council to implement appropriate measures, such as recusal from decision-making or the tender evaluation process, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the procurement. This proactive step ensures compliance with legal obligations and ethical standards, preventing any perception of bias or impropriety. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the tender process without disclosing the relationship, believing it would not influence their judgment. This fails to acknowledge the objective appearance of bias and violates the duty to declare interests as mandated by law and council policy. It undermines the fairness of the procurement process and could lead to legal challenges and reputational damage for the council. Another incorrect approach is to attempt to subtly influence the tender process in favor of the connected company, even if not explicitly instructed to do so. This constitutes a serious breach of trust and potentially illegal activity, directly contravening the employee's fiduciary duty to the council and the principles of fair competition enshrined in procurement law. Such actions would irrevocably damage public confidence and could result in severe disciplinary action and legal consequences. Finally, resigning from the council before the tender process begins, without any disclosure, is also an inappropriate response. While it removes the individual from the immediate conflict, it fails to address the potential for past influence or to inform the council of a situation that might require scrutiny of the tender process itself. Ethical conduct demands transparency and cooperation, not avoidance that leaves potential issues unaddressed. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, adherence to established policies and regulations, and the avoidance of even the appearance of impropriety. When faced with a potential conflict of interest, the immediate steps should be to identify the nature of the conflict, consult relevant policies and codes of conduct, and make a full and frank disclosure to the appropriate oversight body. This allows for informed decisions to be made regarding the management of the conflict, ensuring that public duties are discharged impartially and with integrity. Question 9. Implementation of a driving instructor's duty of care in Kingston upon Hull requires a nuanced approach when a student, anxious about retaking their test, exhibits a noticeable hesitation when changing lanes, potentially indicating a lack of confidence in judging vehicle speeds and distances. Considering the DVSA standards and the Highway Code, which of the following actions best upholds the professional and ethical responsibilities of the driving instructor? Option A. Agree to proceed with the test as planned, focusing solely on the student's emotional state and their desire to pass quickly. Option B. Dismiss the hesitation as a minor issue that the student will likely overcome with more experience on their own after passing. Option C. Identify the specific lane change hesitation. Explain its potential risks in the context of UK road conditions and the highway code, and dedicate further practice to rectify it before the test. Option D. Pass the student immediately to alleviate their anxiety and avoid the need for further lessons, assuming the hesitation is minor. The correct answer is C. Identify the specific lane change hesitation. Explain its potential risks in the context of UK road conditions and the highway code, and dedicate further practice to rectify it before the test. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driving instructor to balance the immediate need to pass a test with the long-term responsibility of ensuring road safety and adherence to the highway code. The pressure from a student who is anxious about retaking the test, coupled with the instructor's own desire for a successful outcome, can create a temptation to overlook minor but potentially dangerous habits. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between minor hesitations and genuine safety risks that must be addressed before a pass can be ethically awarded. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves prioritizing the safety and competence of the driver above all else, even if it means delaying a test pass. This approach involves identifying the specific hesitation regarding lane discipline, explaining its potential risks in the context of UK road conditions and the highway code, and dedicating further practice to rectify it. This aligns with the DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, mandate to ensure drivers are safe and competent, and the ethical obligation of an instructor to provide thorough training, not just test preparation. The Highway Code explicitly details requirements for safe lane usage, and an instructor's duty of care extends to ensuring these are met. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves passing the student despite the observed hesitation. This fails to uphold the DVSA standards for safe driving and breaches the instructor's duty of care. The Highway Code's emphasis on maintaining proper lane discipline is critical for preventing accidents, and overlooking this could lead to dangerous situations on the road, potentially resulting in collisions or penalties for the newly qualified driver. This approach prioritizes a short-term outcome over long-term safety and competence. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the hesitation as insignificant without further assessment. While minor hesitations can occur, a responsible instructor must ascertain the root cause and potential implications. If the hesitation stems from a lack of understanding or confidence in judging vehicle speed and distance, it represents a significant safety concern that needs addressing. Failing to investigate further ignores potential underlying issues that could manifest as dangerous driving. A further incorrect approach is to focus solely on the student's anxiety and agree to proceed with the test without addressing the observed fault. While empathy is important, it should not override professional judgment regarding road safety. The student's anxiety about retaking the test does not negate the need for them to demonstrate safe and competent driving skills as defined by the DVSA and the Highway Code. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Objective assessment of driving performance against DVSA standards and the Highway Code. 2. Clear communication with the student about observed faults, their potential consequences, and the necessary steps for improvement. 3. Prioritizing remedial training over immediate test success when safety is compromised. 4. Maintaining professional integrity by refusing to compromise standards for expediency or to alleviate immediate pressure. Question 10. To address the challenge of preparing a student for their driving test in Kingston upon Hull, a driving instructor observes the following during a mock test. The student hesitates slightly at a junction where there is no immediate traffic, resulting in a minor fault. Later, the student makes a minor adjustment to their steering while navigating a gentle curve, also noted as a minor fault. The student's overall driving is otherwise competent, with excellent hazard perception and adherence to speed limits. If a minor fault is assessed as 1 penalty point, a serious fault as 10 penalty points, and a dangerous fault as an automatic fail, and the DVSA allows a maximum of 15 penalty points from minor faults for a pass, with no serious or dangerous faults. What is the instructor's best course of action to advise the student regarding their test readiness? Assuming the examiner strictly adheres to the DVSA marking scheme. Option A. Advise the student that any minor fault is a significant issue and they should reschedule their test to practice more. Option B. Calculate the total penalty points from the observed minor faults and advise the student that they are within the acceptable limit for a pass, but should still aim to eliminate such minor errors. Option C. Inform the student that since they have only accumulated 2 minor faults, they are guaranteed to pass and should proceed with the test as scheduled. Option D. Focus on the fact that the student has demonstrated good hazard perception and speed control, and therefore the minor faults are negligible and should not be a concern for the test. The correct answer is B. Calculate the total penalty points from the observed minor faults and advise the student that they are within the acceptable limit for a pass, but should still aim to eliminate such minor errors. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driving instructor to balance the immediate need for a student to pass their test with the overarching responsibility of ensuring road safety and adherence to the highway code. Miscalculating the impact of a minor infraction on the overall test result, or prioritizing speed over thoroughness, can lead to a dangerous driver being licensed, which has severe ethical and legal ramifications for both the instructor and the student. The instructor must possess a strong understanding of the specific assessment criteria used by the DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, in Kingston upon Hull. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves accurately calculating the potential penalty points for the observed driving fault and determining its impact on the overall test score according to DVSA guidelines. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core requirement of the driving test, demonstrating safe driving and adherence to the highway code. The DVSA marking scheme, which categorizes faults as minor, serious, or dangerous, and assigns a maximum of 15 minor faults allowed for a pass, with no serious or dangerous faults, is the definitive regulatory framework. By calculating the total potential penalty points, the instructor can objectively assess whether the student is likely to pass or fail based on the established criteria, ensuring that the assessment is fair, transparent, and aligned with public safety objectives. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves assuming that any minor driving fault will automatically result in a fail, regardless of the overall driving performance. This is incorrect because the DVSA marking scheme explicitly allows for up to 15 minor faults. Overestimating the severity of minor faults demonstrates a lack of understanding of the assessment criteria and can lead to unnecessary anxiety for the student and a potentially inaccurate assessment of their readiness. Another incorrect approach is to disregard the minor driving fault entirely, assuming it will not affect the outcome if the rest of the drive is otherwise perfect. This is incorrect because even a single minor fault, if it indicates a lapse in judgment or awareness, contributes to the overall assessment. While 15 minor faults are permissible, the cumulative effect of even a few can indicate a pattern of behavior that might be deemed borderline by the examiner. Furthermore, ignoring it prevents a valuable learning opportunity for the student to correct a potential habit. A third incorrect approach is to focus solely on the number of minor faults without considering the context or potential for escalation. For example, a minor fault related to observation at a junction, if repeated or if it leads to a near miss, could be reclassified as a serious fault by the examiner. This approach fails to account for the dynamic nature of driving assessment and the examiner's discretion in evaluating the severity of faults. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a data-driven and criterion-referenced approach. This involves 1. Understanding the specific assessment criteria, DVSA marking scheme. 2. Objectively observing and recording all driving faults. 3. Quantifying the severity of each fault according to the established guidelines. 4. Calculating the total potential penalty points. 5. Comparing the calculated score against the pass/fail thresholds. 6. Providing constructive feedback based on the objective assessment, highlighting areas for improvement even if the student passes. This systematic process ensures fairness, accuracy, and upholds the professional duty of care to public safety. Question 11. Examination of the data shows that driver approaching a junction in Kingston upon Hull encounters a sign indicating lane ends ahead. The traffic is moderate, and the lane the driver is currently in is one of 2 lanes leading to the same destination. What is the most appropriate action for the driver to take? Option A. Stop in the lane to assess the situation further. Option B. Prepare to merge safely into the adjacent lane well in advance of the lane closure, ensuring to signal and check mirrors. Option C. Continue in the current lane until the very last moment, then attempt to merge. Option D. Assume the sign is a warning and proceed as normal as the lane is not yet closed. The correct answer is B. Prepare to merge safely into the adjacent lane well in advance of the lane closure, ensuring to signal and check mirrors. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver undergoing their Kingston upon Hull driver's test. The challenge lies in interpreting a potentially ambiguous road sign and reacting appropriately in a dynamic traffic environment. The driver must not only understand the meaning of the sign, but also apply that understanding safely and in accordance with the highway code, which governs driving in the UK. Failure to do so could result in a driving fault or even a serious accident. Careful judgment is required to balance adherence to the sign's instruction with the immediate demands of traffic flow and safety. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a driver carefully observing the road sign, processing its meaning in the context of the immediate road layout and traffic conditions, and then acting in a manner that is both compliant with the sign's instruction and prioritizes safety. This means understanding that the sign indicates a specific restriction or instruction, and then making a decision that aligns with that instruction, while ensuring no danger is posed to themselves or other road users. For instance, if the sign indicates a lane closure ahead, the correct approach would be to prepare to merge safely into an open lane well in advance of the closure, signaling appropriately and checking mirrors. This aligns with the principles of safe driving and adherence to traffic regulations as outlined in the Highway Code, specifically sections concerning lane discipline and responding to traffic signs. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to ignore the sign entirely, assuming it is irrelevant or not applicable to their intended path. This is a direct contravention of the Highway Code, which mandates that all traffic signs must be obeyed. Another incorrect approach would be to react impulsively or too late to the sign's instruction, perhaps by braking sharply or swerving at the last moment. This demonstrates a lack of foresight and planning, creating a hazard for other road users and failing to meet the standard of safe driving expected in a test. Further incorrect approach would be to misinterpret the sign's meaning and act on that misinterpretation, for example, by stopping when not required or by proceeding into a restricted area. This highlights a fundamental misunderstanding of road signage and its implications for safe navigation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach to interpreting road signs. This involves 1. Observation, actively scanning the road ahead for signs. 2. Identification, recognizing the type and meaning of the sign. 3. Contextualization, considering the sign's placement surrounding road markings and current traffic conditions. 4. Decision, formulating a safe and compliant course of action. 5. Execution, implementing the decision smoothly and safely with appropriate signaling and checks. This structured approach ensures that drivers are proactive, safe, and compliant with UK road traffic law. Question 12. Research into the practical driving test standards set by the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, DVSA, in Kingston upon Hull reveals that a learner driver, who has consistently demonstrated good driving skills in regular lessons, but exhibits significant anxiety during mock tests, is eager to book their practical test. The driving instructor has observed that this anxiety sometimes leads to minor hesitations and occasional overcautiousness. Though no dangerous driving has occurred, what is the most responsible course of action for the driving instructor? Option A. Postpone any further discussion about the practical test indefinitely until the learner expresses complete confidence and zero anxiety. Option B. Recommend the learner book their practical test immediately, advising them to simply try and push through their anxiety on the day. Option C. Conduct further mock tests under varied conditions, focusing on anxiety management techniques and objectively assessing the learner's ability to drive safely and competently against DVSA criteria before recommending the test. Option D. Book the practical test for the learner without further assessment, assuming their desire to take it indicates sufficient readiness. The correct answer is C. Conduct further mock tests under varied conditions, focusing on anxiety management techniques and objectively assessing the learner's ability to drive safely and competently against DVSA criteria before recommending the test. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Kingston upon Hull due to the inherent subjectivity in assessing a learner driver's readiness for the practical test, particularly when dealing with a student who has a history of anxiety. The instructor must balance the student's desire to progress with the paramount responsibility of ensuring public safety and upholding the standards of the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, DVSA. The instructor's judgment directly impacts the student's confidence, the effectiveness of their training, and the integrity of the testing process. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough, objective assessment of the learner's performance against the DVSA practical driving test criteria, specifically focusing on areas prone to anxiety-induced errors. This includes observing the student's ability to consistently demonstrate safe driving, hazard perception, and independent driving in varied traffic conditions, mirroring the demands of the actual test. The instructor should engage in a detailed discussion with the student about their specific anxieties, collaboratively identify strategies to manage them during the test, e.g., breathing techniques, positive self-talk, and conduct mock tests under realistic examination conditions. The decision to recommend the student for the test should be based on their demonstrated ability to drive safely and competently, irrespective of their subjective feelings of anxiety, provided those feelings do not demonstrably impair their driving to a dangerous degree. This aligns with the DVSA core objective of ensuring that only drivers who can drive safely and competently are licensed. Incorrect approaches analysis. Recommending the student for the test solely based on their persistent assertion that they feel ready, despite the instructor's observations of recurring minor errors under pressure, is professionally unacceptable. This approach prioritizes the student's subjective feelings over objective safety standards and the instructor's professional judgment, potentially leading to a failed test and a loss of confidence, or worse, a license being granted to someone not yet fully competent. Another unacceptable approach is to postpone the test indefinitely due to the student's anxiety, without actively working on coping mechanisms or further developing their driving skills. This fails to adequately prepare the student for the realities of driving independently and may foster a dependency on the instructor, hindering their long-term progress. Finally, advising the student to just push through the anxiety without providing concrete strategies or ensuring their driving is demonstrably safe under test-like conditions is dismissive of their struggles and neglects the instructor's duty of care. It risks the student making critical errors due to overwhelming stress, compromising safety. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a structured decision-making process. First, clearly define the objective criteria for test readiness as stipulated by the DVSA. Second, conduct a comprehensive and objective assessment of the learner's performance against these criteria, noting specific strengths and weaknesses, especially in high-pressure situations. Third, engage in open and empathetic communication with the learner, acknowledging their anxieties and collaboratively developing strategies to manage them. Fourth, conduct realistic mock tests to simulate the examination environment and assess performance under pressure. Finally, make a recommendation for the test based on the totality of objective evidence of safe and competent driving, rather than solely on the learner's subjective feelings or the instructor's desire to avoid difficult conversations. Question 13. Which approach would be most appropriate for a driving instructor preparing a student for their practical driving test in Kingston upon Hull, considering the student expresses significant anxiety about their ability to perform a specific maneuver and has a tendency to rely on memorized routines? Option A. Avoid introducing any challenging or potentially anxiety-inducing driving scenarios, such as busy town center traffic or complex junctions, to ensure the student remains calm throughout the lessons. Option B. Focus on teaching the student specific tricks and shortcuts to pass the maneuver section of the test, emphasizing rote memorization over understanding. Option C. Conduct a thorough assessment of the student's overall driving competence against DVSA standards, focusing on independent driving and hazard perception in varied Kingston upon Hull road conditions, while providing targeted support and practice for the anxious maneuver, explaining its importance within the broader context of safe driving. Option D. Prioritize reassuring the student and exclusively practicing the maneuvers they feel most confident with, downplaying the importance of other skills to reduce their anxiety. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough assessment of the student's overall driving competence against DVSA standards, focusing on independent driving and hazard perception in varied Kingston upon Hull road conditions, while providing targeted support and practice for the anxious maneuver, explaining its importance within the broader context of safe driving. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge for driving instructors, balancing the need to prepare a student for the official Kingston upon Hull driver's test with the student's personal anxieties and potential over-reliance on specific, perhaps less universally applicable techniques. The professional challenge lies in accurately assessing the student's readiness according to the DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, standards, while also managing the student's emotional state and ensuring they develop robust, safe driving habits that extend beyond the test itself. The best approach involves a comprehensive assessment of the student's ability to meet the DVSA test criteria, focusing on independent decision-making and hazard perception in varied traffic conditions typical of Kingston upon Hull. This includes evaluating their ability to execute maneuvers safely and correctly, adhere to speed limits, maintain appropriate observation, and respond effectively to road signs and signals. The justification for this approach is rooted in the DVSA driving test guidance, which emphasizes the examiner's role in assessing whether the candidate can drive safely and competently on their own. The test is designed to ensure drivers are capable of handling everyday driving situations, not just performing specific pre-rehearsed routines. Therefore, focusing on the core competencies required by the DVSA and ensuring the student can apply these independently is paramount. An approach that prioritizes solely reassuring the student and practicing only the specific maneuvers they feel most comfortable with, while neglecting areas where they show less confidence or understanding, is professionally unacceptable. This fails to address potential weaknesses that could lead to a failed test or, more importantly, unsafe driving post-test. It also deviates from the DVSA objective of assessing overall driving competence. Similarly, an approach that focuses excessively on teaching tricks or shortcuts to pass the test, rather than on developing genuine understanding and safe driving habits, is ethically unsound and contravenes the spirit of the DVSA regulations. Such methods can create a false sense of security and may lead to dangerous driving behaviors once the instructor is no longer present. Finally, an approach that avoids introducing challenging but realistic driving scenarios, such as busy roundabouts or complex junctions common in Kingston upon Hull, out of fear of upsetting the student, is also flawed. This creates an artificial learning environment that does not adequately prepare the student for the unpredictable nature of real-world driving and the demands of the official test. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a structured process. First, clearly understanding the DVSA assessment criteria for the Kingston upon Hull test. Second, conducting an objective evaluation of the student's current skill level against these criteria. Third, developing a tailored lesson plan that addresses identified weaknesses while reinforcing strengths, ensuring a balance between test-specific preparation and the development of general safe driving skills. Fourth, communicating openly and honestly with the student about their progress and areas for improvement, managing their expectations and anxieties constructively. The instructor's role is to guide, educate, and assess, ensuring the student is not only ready for the test, but also a safe and responsible driver. Question 14. Governance review demonstrates that a driving instructor in Kingston upon Hull has been observed to be overly lenient during practical driving lessons, particularly concerning the candidate's approach to a complex, multi-lane roundabout. The instructor has noted the candidate's hesitation and occasional incorrect lane selection, but has largely allowed the candidate to figure it out during the lesson, focusing more on completing the planned route efficiently rather than reinforcing correct procedures for this specific hazard. Which of the following represents the most appropriate professional response from the driving instructor in this situation? Option A. Allow the candidate to continue attempting the roundabout independently, offering minimal guidance, and only intervene if a dangerous situation arises. Option B. Continue with the planned route, making a mental note to mention the roundabout issue briefly at the end of the lesson, assuming the candidate will learn from experience. Option C. Advise the candidate that the roundabout is particularly tricky and suggest they avoid it on their test day if possible, focusing on simpler routes. Option D. Immediately halt the lesson and provide a detailed explanation of the correct procedure for navigating the complex roundabout, including observation, signaling, and lane discipline, followed by supervised practice until mastery is achieved. The correct answer is D. Immediately halt the lesson and provide a detailed explanation of the correct procedure for navigating the complex roundabout, including observation, signaling, and lane discipline, followed by supervised practice until mastery is achieved. Explanation. Governance review demonstrates a need for enhanced clarity in the application of the highway code and local traffic regulations within Kingston upon Hull. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driving instructor to balance the immediate need to pass the test with the long-term responsibility of ensuring the candidate is a safe and competent road user, adhering to all legal requirements. The instructor must also navigate potential pressure from the candidate or their family to overlook minor but important infractions. The best professional practice involves the driving instructor meticulously observing the candidate's adherence to all aspects of the highway code and specific Kingston upon Hull traffic bylaws, including correct signaling, observation at junctions, speed management relative to road conditions and signage, and appropriate lane discipline. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, mandate to ensure all newly qualified drivers are safe, competent, and knowledgeable of the rules of the road. The Highway Code, as legally mandated guidance, and local bylaws are the definitive standards against which driving ability is assessed. Prioritizing comprehensive adherence ensures the candidate is not only prepared for the test, but also for independent driving, upholding public safety, and the integrity of the licensing process. An approach where the instructor focuses solely on the candidate's ability to navigate the test route without significant errors, overlooking minor but persistent issues with observation at a specific roundabout, is professionally unacceptable. This fails to address a critical safety aspect and potentially allows a candidate to pass who may pose a risk to themselves and others due to inadequate hazard perception. It also contravenes the spirit of the DVSA assessment, which is about overall competence, not just route memorization. Another unacceptable approach is for the instructor to dismiss a candidate's repeated failure to check their blind spot before changing lanes, attributing it to nerves and assuming it will improve with experience. This is a fundamental safety procedure. Failing to correct such a significant lapse in observation demonstrates a dereliction of duty and a disregard for the potential consequences, which could include accidents. It prioritizes the immediate outcome of the test over the candidate's actual safety and the safety of other road users. Finally, an instructor who allows a candidate to proceed despite a clear disregard for a mandatory stop sign at a junction, rationalizing that the road was clear and no other vehicles were present, is acting unprofessionally. This demonstrates a failure to uphold the law and the critical importance of obeying traffic control devices, regardless of perceived immediate risk. Such an attitude undermines the entire purpose of driving tests and licensing, which is to ensure all drivers understand and respect traffic regulations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety, legal compliance, and ethical conduct. This involves continuous assessment of the candidate's understanding and application of driving principles against the highway code and local regulations. When deviations occur, the instructor must assess their severity and potential impact on safety and legality. The decision to pass or fail should be based on a holistic evaluation of the candidate's ability to drive safely and legally, not just on their performance on a specific test route or their ability to avoid major blunders. The instructor's role is to educate and assess, ensuring that only those who meet the required standards are licensed. Question 15. The risk matrix shows a potential for a driver taking their practical driving test in Kingston upon Hull to be experiencing significant personal stress due to a recent family bereavement, which they have disclosed to the examiner prior to the test commencing. The driver states they feel capable of driving, but are concerned their emotional state might affect their concentration. How should the examiner proceed? Option A. Proceed with the test but offer a less demanding route or fewer complex maneuvers to accommodate the driver's stated difficulties. Option B. Immediately postpone the test, advising the driver to reschedule when they feel more emotionally prepared. Option C. Conduct the test as scheduled, maintaining heightened awareness of the driver's concentration and overall driving performance, and be prepared to intervene if safety is compromised. Option D. Conduct a shortened test focusing only on essential road rules, as a gesture of understanding. The correct answer is C. Conduct the test as scheduled, maintaining heightened awareness of the driver's concentration and overall driving performance, and be prepared to intervene if safety is compromised. Explanation: the risk matrix shows a potential conflict between a driver's personal circumstances and the requirements of the Kingston upon Hull driver's test. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the examiner to balance the need for a fair and objective assessment of driving ability with the driver's stated personal difficulties, which could potentially impact their performance. Careful judgment is required to ensure the test proceeds appropriately without compromising safety or fairness. The best approach involves acknowledging the driver's stated difficulties and assessing their impact on the test. This means proceeding with the test as planned, but with heightened awareness and a focus on observing how the driver manages their condition during the practical assessment. If the driver's condition demonstrably impairs their ability to drive safely or to meet the required standards of the Kingston upon Hull driver's test, the examiner must be prepared to stop the test and provide appropriate feedback. This approach is correct because it upholds the integrity of the testing process, prioritizes public safety, and adheres to the fundamental principles of the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency (DVSA) guidelines, which mandate objective assessment of driving competence. It allows for fair evaluation of the driver's skills under normal testing conditions, while remaining vigilant for any safety concerns. Proceeding with the test without any specific observation or consideration of the driver's stated difficulties would be an incorrect approach. This fails to acknowledge the potential impact of the driver's condition, which could lead to an unfair assessment if their performance is genuinely affected. It also risks overlooking potential safety issues that might arise due to the condition, suggesting a postponement of the test solely based on the driver's statement, without any immediate observation of their driving ability or a clear indication that the condition would prevent a safe test, is also an incorrect approach. This could be seen as prejudging the driver's capability and potentially denying them the opportunity to demonstrate their skills. It deviates from the principle of assessing actual driving performance. Offering to conduct a less rigorous or modified test is fundamentally incorrect. The Kingston upon Hull driver's test has specific, standardized criteria that must be met by all candidates to ensure a consistent and reliable measure of driving competence. Any deviation from these standards would compromise the validity of the test and the licensing process. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and fairness. This involves 1. Understanding the stated issue and its potential implications. 2. Proceeding with the standard assessment while maintaining heightened observation. 3. Continuously evaluating the driver's performance against the established test criteria. 4. Making a decision based on observed driving ability and safety, rather than solely on pretest statements or assumptions. 5. Providing clear, constructive feedback regardless of the outcome. Question 16. Strategic planning requires a driver operating a delivery vehicle in Kingston upon Hull to navigate an unexpected road closure on their usual route. Which of the following actions demonstrates the most responsible and compliant approach? Option A. Attempt to bypass the closure by driving through a residential area not typically used for commercial traffic without checking for local restrictions. Option B. Immediately consult official Hull City Council traffic advisories and real-time navigation data that incorporates local road closure information to identify an alternative, safe, and legal route. Option C. Proceed with the usual route, assuming the closure is minor and will not significantly impact their journey, relying on personal knowledge of alternative backstreets. Option D. Continue to the closure point and wait for it to be cleared, without seeking alternative routes or informing dispatch of the delay. The correct answer is B. Immediately consult official Hull City Council traffic advisories and real-time navigation data that incorporates local road closure information to identify an alternative, safe, and legal route. Explanation: strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of the road network and potential hazards. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves balancing the immediate need for efficient route planning with the paramount responsibility of ensuring driver safety and compliance with Hull's specific traffic regulations. A driver's decision-making process under pressure, especially when faced with unexpected road closures or diversions, directly impacts public safety and the efficiency of their service. Careful judgment is required to select a route that is not only timely, but also legally permissible and safe for all road users. The best approach involves proactively consulting official Hull City Council traffic advisories and real-time navigation data that incorporates local road closure information. This method is correct because it prioritizes official, up-to-date information directly relevant to Hull's road network. Adhering to official advisories ensures compliance with local traffic management schemes, diversions, and any temporary restrictions that might be in place, thereby minimizing risks of contravening traffic laws or encountering unforeseen hazards. This proactive stance aligns with the professional duty of care expected of drivers operating within a specific municipality. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on a driver's personal knowledge of Hull's roads without verifying current conditions. This is professionally unacceptable as personal knowledge can become outdated, and it fails to account for dynamic changes like emergency roadworks or special events that are communicated through official channels. Another incorrect approach is to assume a previously used route will still be clear, ignoring the possibility of new or ongoing disruptions. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to adapt to changing circumstances, potentially leading to delays or unsafe navigation. Finally, choosing a route based on perceived speed without consulting any traffic advisories or real-time data is irresponsible. This prioritizes personal convenience or perceived efficiency over safety and regulatory compliance, which is a significant ethical and professional failing. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the objective e.g., reaching a destination. This is followed by gathering relevant information, prioritizing official and real-time data sources specific to the operating jurisdiction, Hull in this case. Next, potential routes are evaluated against safety, legality, and efficiency criteria. The chosen route should then be continuously monitored for any new information that might necessitate a change. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, responsible, and aligned with professional standards and local regulations. Question 17. Strategic planning requires a learner driver in Kingston upon Hull to understand and correctly execute various driving maneuvers. You are practicing a specific maneuver, and your friend, who passed their test last year, suggests a slightly different technique than your approved driving instructor, Addie, has taught you. Your ADI emphasizes a method that aligns with the official highway code, while your friend claims their method is quicker and what the examiner expects. What is the most professional and safest course of action? Option A. Avoid practicing the maneuver altogether to prevent confusion and potential errors. Option B. Discuss the discrepancy with your approved driving instructor, seek their clarification, and consult the official highway code to confirm the correct procedure. Option C. Attempt the maneuver using your friend's technique without informing your ADI, hoping it will impress the examiner. Option D. Immediately adopt your friend's suggested technique, as it is likely more current and what examiners are looking for. The correct answer is B. Discuss the discrepancy with your approved driving instructor, seek their clarification, and consult the official highway code to confirm the correct procedure. Explanation. Strategic planning requires careful consideration of various factors to ensure safe and legal driving. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a learner driver in Kingston upon Hull who has received conflicting advice regarding a specific driving maneuver. The challenge lies in discerning the correct, safe, and legally compliant procedure from potentially misleading or dangerous suggestions, all while operating under the supervision of a qualified instructor. The learner must prioritize safety and adherence to the highway code, which is the definitive guide for driving in the UK. The best approach involves the learner driver seeking clarification directly from their approved driving instructor, Addie, and referencing the official highway code for the specific maneuver in question. This is correct because the ADI is legally responsible for training the learner to the required standard and ensuring they understand and can execute maneuvers safely and in accordance with UK road traffic law. The highway code provides the authoritative, legally recognized guidance on all aspects of driving, including specific maneuvers. By cross-referencing the ADI's instruction with the highway code, the learner reinforces their understanding and ensures they are following the correct procedure as mandated by law. This proactive approach demonstrates a commitment to safe driving and compliance. An incorrect approach would be to disregard the ADI's advice and solely rely on the friend's suggestion. This is professionally unacceptable as it bypasses the qualified instructor's expertise and the legal framework governing driving instruction. The friend, while well-intentioned, may not possess up-to-date knowledge of driving regulations or the specific requirements for passing a driving test in Kingston upon Hull. This could lead to the learner practicing unsafe or illegal techniques, potentially resulting in a failed test or, more critically, an accident. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt the maneuver based on the friend's advice without consulting the ADI or the highway code. This demonstrates a lack of professional judgment and a failure to prioritize safety and legal compliance. The learner is under the ADI's supervision for a reason to ensure they are learning correct and safe practices. Ignoring this supervision and acting on unverified advice is a significant ethical and regulatory lapse. A further incorrect approach would be to ignore both the ADI's advice and the friend's suggestion, and simply avoid performing the maneuver altogether. While avoiding a potentially difficult maneuver might seem like a short-term solution, it fails to address the learning objective. The driving test in Kingston upon Hull requires proficiency in a range of maneuvers. Avoiding practice means the learner will not be adequately prepared for the test, nor will they have developed the necessary skills for safe driving in real-world situations. This approach neglects the core purpose of driving lessons. The professional reasoning process for such situations involves a hierarchy of information sources. The primary source of instruction and legal guidance for a learner driver is their approved driving instructor, supported by the official highway code. Any conflicting advice from unofficial sources, such as friends or family, should be treated with extreme caution and always verified against the primary sources. Learners should be encouraged to ask questions and seek clarification from their ADI whenever they are unsure about a procedure. This fosters a culture of continuous learning, safety, and adherence to regulations. Question 18. Strategic planning requires a driving instructor in Kingston upon Hull to consider how best to prepare a learner for their practical driving test. A learner who has been practicing for several months and is eager to book their test consistently demonstrates good control of the vehicle and can navigate most road situations competently. However, they occasionally hesitate when making observations at complex junctions and sometimes struggle to anticipate potential hazards on faster rural roads surrounding Kingston upon Hull. Given these observations, what is the most responsible and professionally sound course of action for the instructor? Option A. Suggest the learner take the test with the understanding that the examiner will provide feedback on their weaker areas and that passing is the primary objective. Option B. Continue to focus on refining the learner's hazard perception and observation skills at junctions, ensuring they consistently demonstrate proactive anticipation and timely, appropriate responses before recommending they book their practical driving test. Option C. Advise the learner to book their practical driving test as soon as possible, focusing on practicing common test routes and common faults to maximize their chances of passing, given their overall competence. Option D. Prioritize the learner's desire to pass quickly by concentrating solely on the mechanics of driving and vehicle control, assuming that hazard perception will improve with experience after passing the test. The correct answer is B. Continue to focus on refining the learner's hazard perception and observation skills at junctions, ensuring they consistently demonstrate proactive anticipation and timely, appropriate responses before recommending they book their practical driving test. Explanation. Strategic planning requires careful consideration of various factors to ensure a driver's readiness for the road. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves balancing the immediate need for a driver to pass their test with the paramount importance of public safety and adherence to the stringent standards set by the DVSA, Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, for the Kingston upon Hull area. A driving instructor must exercise sound professional judgment, understanding that their role extends beyond mere test preparation to cultivating safe and responsible driving habits. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the learner's skills against the official DVSA syllabus for the Kingston upon Hull area, focusing on consistent demonstration of safe driving practices and hazard perception. This includes ensuring the learner can independently identify, assess, and respond to potential dangers in various road conditions typical of Kingston upon Hull, such as navigating busy urban junctions, rural roads, and potentially adverse weather. The instructor must be confident that the learner's abilities meet the required standard for passing the test, which is a direct reflection of their competence and adherence to the highway code and DVSA guidelines. This approach is correct because it prioritizes public safety and upholds the integrity of the driving test as a measure of competence, aligning with the DVSA mandate to reduce road casualties. An incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the learner's desire to pass quickly, perhaps by drilling them on specific test routes or common test faults, without ensuring a deep understanding of underlying principles. This fails to address the core requirement of safe driving and hazard management, potentially leading to a driver who can pass a test but is not truly safe on the road. This is ethically problematic as it compromises public safety and undermines the purpose of the driving test. Another incorrect approach would be to overlook minor but persistent errors in areas like observation at junctions or speed management, assuming they are insignificant. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to uphold the DVSA standards, which are designed to ensure drivers are capable of handling all foreseeable driving situations safely. Such an oversight could have serious consequences on the road. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to pressure the learner into taking the test before they are ready, perhaps due to the instructor's own scheduling pressures or the learner's insistence. This prioritizes convenience or expediency over safety and professional responsibility, violating the ethical obligation to ensure a learner is genuinely competent before they are licensed. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the regulatory requirements, DVSA syllabus, highway code, and ethical obligations, public safety, professional integrity. This should be followed by a comprehensive and objective assessment of the learner's skills, identifying strengths and weaknesses. The decision to recommend a test should be based on whether the learner consistently demonstrates the required competency, not on external pressures or a desire for a quick pass. Regular feedback and a focus on developing a proactive, safe driving mindset are crucial throughout the learning process. Question 19. Strategic planning requires a driving instructor preparing a client for their practical driving test in Kingston upon Hull to consider the unique aspects of the local testing environment. Which of the following strategies would best equip the learner for success at the Kingston upon Hull driver's test? Option A. Relying on the learner's previous driving experience from another town, assuming the test requirements are universally identical. Option B. Researching common routes and frequently identified fault areas specific to the Kingston upon Hull Test Center and incorporating targeted practice in those locations. Option C. Focusing exclusively on advanced driving techniques and hazard perception, assuming general competence will suffice for any test center. Option D. Covering a wide array of general driving scenarios without specific regard for the Kingston upon Hull Test Center's particular characteristics. Correct answer is B. Researching common routes and frequently identified fault areas specific to the Kingston upon Hull Test Center and incorporating targeted practice in those locations. Explanation. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of the local driving environment and its specific regulations to ensure safe and effective preparation for the Kingston upon Hull driver's test. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driving instructor to balance the learner's immediate desire for practice with the paramount responsibility of ensuring they are adequately prepared for the specific requirements of the Hull Test Center, which may include unique road layouts, traffic patterns, or common testing faults identified by local examiners. A failure to tailor instruction to these specifics could lead to the learner failing the test, not due to a lack of general driving skill, but due to unfamiliarity with the testing environment. The best approach involves meticulously researching the specific requirements and common challenges associated with the Kingston upon Hull driver's test. This includes understanding the typical routes used by examiners, identifying areas where learners frequently make mistakes, e.g., specific junctions, roundabouts, or maneuvers, and incorporating practice in these exact locations. This is correct because it directly addresses the objective of passing the test within its defined parameters. The Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, DVSA guidelines, which govern the Hull test, emphasize the need for candidates to demonstrate safe driving in a variety of conditions and to be familiar with the testing area. Tailoring practice to the Hull Test Center's specific context aligns with these guidelines by ensuring the learner is not just a competent driver, but a competent driver prepared for the *specific* assessment they will undergo. An approach that focuses solely on general driving skills without considering the Hull Test Center's specific demands is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the implicit requirement of preparing the candidate for the actual test they will take, potentially leading to unnecessary test failures and wasted expense for the learner. It also neglects the professional duty of care to equip the learner with the most relevant skills and knowledge for their immediate goal. Another unacceptable approach is to assume that a learner who has passed a test in another town or city will automatically be prepared for the Hull test. Each test center has its own nuances, and a lack of specific preparation for Hull's environment could lead to errors. This overlooks the importance of local knowledge and examiner expectations. Finally, an approach that prioritizes covering a broad range of general driving scenarios over specific Hull test center preparation is also flawed. While general competence is important, the immediate objective is to pass the Hull test. Overlooking specific local requirements in favor of a generic curriculum fails to provide the most effective preparation for the candidate's immediate goal. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the objective, passing the Hull driver's test. This should be followed by gathering specific information about the testing environment and requirements. The next step is to develop a tailored training plan that addresses these specifics, integrating general driving skills with targeted practice. Regular assessment and feedback, adjusted to the Hull test context, are crucial. Finally, a review of the learner's progress against the specific requirements of the Hull test should inform the final stages of preparation. Question 20. System analysis indicates that a driving instructor in Kingston upon Hull has a standard hourly rate of £35 for a 1-hour driving lesson. Their policy, clearly communicated to students, is that any time exceeding the scheduled hour is charged pro rata at a rate of £17.50 per 30 minutes. A student's lesson, which was scheduled for 1 hour, unexpectedly ran 15 minutes over due to a minor traffic incident that required the instructor to navigate a detour. What is the correct total charge for this lesson? Option A, £43.75. Option B, £40.00. Option C, £45.00. Option D, £35.00. The correct answer is A, £43.75. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for driving instructors in Kingston upon Hull, requiring them to balance the practicalities of lesson scheduling with the financial implications for both themselves and their students. The core difficulty lies in accurately estimating the time required for a lesson, especially when unexpected delays occur, and then applying a fair and compliant pricing structure. The instructor must navigate potential student dissatisfaction due to perceived overcharging or undercharging, while adhering to the principles of fair trading and the specific guidance relevant to driving instruction in the UK. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a transparent and pre-agreed pricing structure that accounts for potential variations in lesson duration. This approach, which involves charging a fixed rate per hour and clearly communicating the policy for lessons running over time, aligns with principles of fair trading and consumer protection. Specifically, the Driving and Vehicle Standards Agency (DVSA) guidance emphasizes clear communication and fair pricing. By stating that a 1-hour lesson costs £35 and any additional time is charged pro rata at £17.50 per 30 minutes, the instructor establishes a predictable cost for the student. When a lesson runs 15 minutes over, the additional charge is £8.75, making the total £43.75. This method ensures that the instructor is compensated for their time and resources while providing the student with a clear understanding of the costs involved, preventing disputes and maintaining trust. Incorrect approach is analysis. Charging a flat £40 for a lesson that ran over time, without any adjustment for the extra 15 minutes, is ethically problematic. This approach fails to reflect the actual service provided and could be seen as overcharging the student, violating principles of fair trading. It also deviates from the pro rata calculation that would accurately reflect the additional time. Charging only £35 for a lesson that ran 15 minutes over time, effectively absorbing the cost of the extra time, is also professionally unsound. While seemingly generous, this practice devalues the instructor's time and resources. Over time, this can lead to financial unsustainability for the instructor and sets an unfair precedent for future lessons. It also fails to adhere to the principle of charging for services rendered. Charging an additional £10 for the extra 15 minutes, bringing the total to £45, is an arbitrary increase that lacks a clear basis. Without a pre-agreed policy or a justifiable reason for a higher surcharge than the pro rata rate, this approach appears punitive and unfair to the student. It deviates from the transparent and consistent pricing expected in professional services. Professional reasoning. Professionals in the driving instruction sector in Kingston upon Hull should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, fairness, and adherence to regulatory guidelines. This involves 1. Establishing clear, written terms and conditions regarding lesson pricing, duration, and cancellation policies before commencing instruction. 2. Utilizing a consistent and justifiable pricing structure, such as an hourly rate with pro rata charges for additional time. 3. Communicating any deviations from the standard lesson duration and associated costs to the student promptly and clearly. 4. Regularly reviewing pricing to ensure it remains competitive and sustainable while reflecting the value of the service provided. 5. Prioritizing open communication with students to address any concerns or misunderstandings regarding lesson fees.